Good evening, everybody. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. They offered me a mic. I said, man, mics are weird. They're kind of impersonal. They don't really get loud. And I kind of want to have a conversation with you guys today. My name is Mark Kobelja. I am a doctor, a medical doctor, and I happen to be in the Navy. I've been in the Navy since 1987. I went to a tiny Jesuit college in LA. That's Lower Alabama, not your LA. Spring Hill College. I took a degree in mathematics. At the time, no family affiliation with the military at all. My dad was and is a tenured professor of philosophy. He wouldn't speak to me for a year after I accepted a military training opportunity. He was really offended by it. So today is not about politics, and I want to be very upfront and very clear about that. What I'm here to talk to you guys about is medicine in the United States, which happens to be uniform. And I'll answer your questions about that as we go. Please, if you have a question, just jump right in. Anyway, so young college kid, just finishing a degree in mathematics. I was working my way through college, working at an oil refinery. Probably get lung cancer or something from it too. Because those were the bad old days. And it was a great job, paid a lot. And I had a great interest in medicine, but I honestly did not have the confidence. I wasn't sure about myself in medicine. I wasn't sure I could get in, and even if I could get in, I wasn't sure how successful I would be. And I don't know how many of you have those feelings about medicine in general or just life, but that definitely was a big part of the equation for me. I'd always been interested in going to sea, something that I thought was interesting, and so the Navy seemed like a good opportunity. And at the time, they were kind of growing a little bit, and the thought of being a deck officer on a ship at sea, a U.S. Navy warship at sea, was something that was very interesting to me and kind of fit into how I saw the world, how it works, trying to figure out how it works. And I had a great time. I loved it. I spent 5 years doing that. I was assigned to a destroyer. I've got great sea stories, some of which are embarrassing, and most of which are life affirming. And I learned a lot about myself. I had a family. But in the back of my head, it never went away. Medicine. It was something that I was really interested in. And a cool thing about military service that I had, at least, was I had gained a lot of confidence in myself. So here I am, a young 23-year-old on a ship at sea. I'm the officer of the deck underway, so everybody else was asleep. At one point, we had even gone to the Persian Gulf. This was before the first Persian Gulf War. It was the bad old days. We were escorting the super tankers in and out. And a couple ships had gotten blown up. And, for everybody back in the United States, they were asleep in their beds and had no idea. And there we were. A young guy just doing his thing, and I learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about my country, about the history of the world, about our place in the world, and all the goodness and badness that came with it. But all along the way, I gained a lot of confidence in myself. So I was very glad I did. At the time, a medical school had been started by the Department of Defense because training and holding on to doctors was very difficult to do. And the name of the school is Uniformed Services University. And the deal at the time was that if you were a currently serving officer in the Navy or any of the other services, you could apply, and if you were accepted, they would release you from any military obligations you had to allow you to go to the medical school. Sounded cool. I did it. Got accepted. Got accepted to a couple other medical schools, which just never entered into the equation because I loved the Navy. It had really helped me personally, and I wanted to give back. This was all in the late 80s. So I go to medical school. A couple things that neat about it. And I'm not pitching Uniformed Services University. It's a great school, but it's not the best school, nor is it the only school. It's just my experience. A couple cool things about it, though. A real intense focus on primary care. That's what they want. I happen to be an anesthesiologist, so it didn't stick. But it's there. So great exposure to primary care. In addition to the Navy sponsoring students there, the Army, the Air Force, and the Public Health Service do as well. So my classmates were from those other services. Wide variety of backgrounds. Some of us prior line officers, some of us prior enlisted, some people had medical backgrounds, most didn't. And we all learned how to be doctors together in that environment. It's a great education. And you can go online, you can read about that school, you can read about students that have graduated from it. It's held on through thick and thin, and there's now a professional corps of medical officers on all those services that have graduated and are still on active duty or have retired and moved on. But I had a great experience there, and I learned a lot about myself again. Learned how to be a good doctor, in my opinion, and it's nationally rated, meaning that it participates in all the national certification exams, and then they compare their students to the students from all other medical schools, and it ranks very well. Pass rate's very high. It's much harder to get in than it is to get through it, because they build the curriculum in a way that really encourages you to do well and learn your craft. And I think I benefited gratefully from it, but not everybody would enjoy it. So it's out there. After I finished medical school, the Navy said, hey, we'd like you to stay in Bethesda. It's right there on the Bethesda campus. We'd like you to come right over here to the Navy Hospital Bethesda. You can do your internship here. I picked surgery. While I was doing my surgical internship, I decided anesthesia was the residency for me. I stayed on to do another 4 years of training, 3 more years of anesthesia, and then a 4th year of fellowship in pain medicine. Then I'm a staff anesthesiologist there. Cool stuff. Doing anesthesia. We do hearts at that time. We still do at that hospital. So open heart surgery. We're doing babies in the NICU, surgery for them. So one day I'll be doing anesthesia on a 95-year-old retiree who's healthy as a horse and just needs a hernia repair, and then the next day it's a 1-day-old who needs a central line placement for a very significant illness that they were born with. So you would think, God, that's a military hospital. That's 95, 1-day-old. That's weird. Yeah, that's what we do. We take care of the beneficiaries, the people that are eligible for the care. Very few of them are active duty. So I was doing that for a while, teaching residents. It was like it was just a regular hospital. I just happened to be in a uniform, which was usually everyday scrubs. You wouldn't wear my uniform very often. But I share that with you because September 11th, 2001 happened. And it happened in DC. A lot of it, not most of it, but a lot of it. And a couple of things transformed, and military medicine sort of got back to its roots then, because we engaged in not one but 2 land wars, which required a great deal of sea support. And in Navy medicine, who do you think our primary constituent? Who do we support in an open battle? Yes. So sometimes soldiers, but which group? Marines. You have read about Marine history. They like to fight, and they win, but they get bloodied as part of it. And so, Navy medicine goes to the battlefield with them. The other thing about warfare, and again, you're students, you're grown-ups, you're American citizens, you understand this. The other thing about warfare is it's never just the soldiers. There's always a population involved. And the group that is charged with managing that part of it is, of course, the medical teams. And so when I was in Iraq, a big part of the work I was doing, even though I was there to support the Marines, I would say 90% of the medical work I did as an anesthesiologist was actually taking care of Iraqis. And that's the nature of life, modern life. So that's kind of my background and where I came from and how I got here. So what is here for me? Now I have been a practicing anesthesiologist for about 14 years. I am the Chief Operating Officer, so the second in charge of the Navy Hospital at San Diego. Admiral Faison, who is the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, Commanding Officer in our which would be here. He was actually scheduled to be here today and talk to you, but he, amongst his duties, is actually down in Arizona attending the funeral of a young Navy medic, a corpsman we call him, that was killed in Africa just this week. It's been in the news. And so it's a gentle reminder of what is Navy medicine. It's expeditionary medicine. Your country, you, citizen of the United States, pays us to be that expeditionary medical force that supports whatever contingency requirements there are. And I'm going to show a couple of videos, I think, that will kind of highlight that. I'll get to that in just one second. But so that's kind of how I got here. That's what I do now. What is my life like at the Navy hospital here? We'll talk a little bit about how big it is. 6,700 people work there. We, at our hospital, provide well over 1 million medication prescriptions. We have 23 residencies and training programs. 99.9% of our doctors are board certified. We have a level 3 NICU, so the highest level NICU that's available. We do open heart surgery. We do open brain surgery. In fact, as I told you, I'm an anesthesiologist. My case tomorrow is a young woman who needs to have a craniotomy for an intracranial process. And I'll be doing the anesthesia for that. So young children, we deliver 300 babies a month. We have lots of clinics, all the specialties you can think of, most of the subspecialties. And you're probably asking, well, what the heck does that have to do with everything you just talked about? Battlefield medicine, humanitarian relief, expeditionary medicine, what are you talking about? It sounds like Sharp, or Scripps, or UCSD. What's the difference? The difference is we are required, with very little notice, to deploy all of that medical skill and provide the standard of care and the level of care that has become customary in the United States. Very high level of clinical, that's medical and surgical care, whether it's nursing, whether it's technical, whether it's surgical. There's an expectation that we do that. How the heck do you do that if you don't practice? How do you maintain your skills? How are you ready to do that? And oh, by the way, your patients that you're going to practice on have a choice. Congress has said you don't have to go there. So we have to be so good at what we do. Patients trust us, because if they don't, they're just not going to come. So that's what's so cool about military medicine, is you will support humanitarian operations. You might be on the battlefield. You will be in a large teaching hospital providing state-of-the-art care on the entire spectrum of human disease. You will study. You will work hard. You're compensated well enough that you can pay the bills and take care of your kids, but you don't have to apologize for making too much money or being part of the problem in healthcare resources in the United States. And I'm sharing this with you because it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what your aspirations are within medicine. And it doesn't matter what you want out of it. It's available in the federal service. Now, I haven't even talked about the VA. I haven't even talked about many other highly subsidized federal programs. So lots of opportunity. And it's yours for the taking. So, any questions? Anything I've said so far? Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I was wondering, so say we apply to the program, are there any commitments that we make to the military? Say, if we apply to the medical program is provided? And then do we have to spend like a certain amount of years in the military after we graduate, or?
Yes.
Could you like elaborate on that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. All right, so like anything in life, nothing's free. So all the cool stuff I just told you about does have there's a contract. Some things, back when I was younger, I'd say you sell your soul, but that's not really true. You exchange, it's a contract that you're gonna make with the federal government to train you. And the federal government's kind of a funny thing, it's kind of, we would say federal government like some third entity out there, it is us. So you're contracting with yourself, with the American people. They will subsidize your medical education. And in exchange for that great investment, which at the current rate is probably well over $1 million if you just simply were trying to buy the equivalent experience. In exchange for that, they ask that you stay on for a few years and pay it back in labor, for which you're compensated. So the answer is yes. And it's very similar to just joining the military. There's a lot of training that comes with military service. There's a lot of societal benefit that comes from military benefit. In exchange, you obligate yourself to some exchange of services. So what are the different examples of it? Uniform services is a 7-year obligation, not to include any training. So I told you I did 5 years of training, plus I had 7 years of obligation, so I had to stay in the military 12 years from the day I graduated from medical school.
Here's a quick question.
Yeah.
Of those 7 years, how many times were you deployed?
In those 12 years, I've deployed 3 times. Some people have deployed 5, 6, 7, 8 times. But if you join the military to deploy, which I would say 75% have, they love it. In other words, if you join to do trauma surgery or join to do humanitarian relief, you can't do that at San Diego Medical Center. You got to deploy. That makes sense.
No.
Okay, so that's uniform services. If you want to do HPSP, which is the scholarship program that the military offers, it's usually a year for year. So if you ask for 4 years of subsidy of your medical school, they're going to want 4 years of obligation out of that, not to include any training. Since you have to do at least an internship, that's 1 year of training right out the gate. Doesn't count. And then almost everybody's going to want to do a residency because that's the normal. The days of the GPs, the general practitioners, are long gone. We have general medical officers in the military where we will take someone who has finished their internship and is now a licensed physician, and we will have them assigned to a small ship or a small marine unit to provide kind of basic, what I call occupational health support. First responder, medical readiness type stuff. They'll do it for a year or 2 and typically come right back to a hospital and begin their training. We have a subset of general medical officers who actually receive some follow-on operational medicine training. They're called, have you ever heard of flight surgeons? So these are people who've finished their internship, they're licensed physicians. They get another few months of aviation, aerospace specific physiology training, and then they are going to be assigned to a flight squadron, and they'll spend about 2.5 years with that flight squadron supporting them in medical readiness, and oh, by the way, they get to fly too. We also have the same thing with dive officers. So these are people who receive additional training in dive physiology and medicine. And then they'll be assigned to a submarine squadron or to a dive unit, and oh, by the way, they get to dive. And they're doing the really cool Navy salvage diving, like the really high-end stuff. So lots of those opportunities too. All right, let me show a couple of videos, and it may inspire some additional questions as well. These are not recruiting videos. I do want to say, I am not here to recruit you. I was asked to come and just talk a little bit about what Navy medicine is and what UCSD is. And these are nice because they just kind of orient you a little bit. So that's the intent. So what I like about this, I almost sometimes wish I should play it without the music because that's kind of open, but what I like about it is the imagery. What you see is a lot of young people. And I think that's one of the defining characteristics of the military in general, but certainly in Navy medicine. I'm an old guy in Navy medicine, I truly am. What's really neat is very young people are put in charge of or made responsible for really significant things. And that's, I think, some of the compelling imagery that's coming out of that little brief montage. The next video I'm going to show you has a lot more speaking in it. And it was put together after the Navy's response to Haiti. So how many are aware of what happened in Haiti? Just a show of hands. So as you recall, significant earthquake. Now, by California standards, I think it was like 7.6 or I think is what I remember. So by California standards, it's like, really? That's it? The problem is, of course, is that the country had absolutely no earthquake building standards at all. And the 7.6 essentially leveled. And the way they lived there, it actually exposed a significant portion of the population to very significant injury, and they have no medical infrastructure at all. So the Navy responded by sending an aircraft battle group, which happened to be in the area, doing operations, and they immediately went down there. So there was a Navy presence within 12 hours. Coast Guard was there very quickly. But the key thing that this little video is going to focus on is the hospital ship, the Comfort. And we have two. There's one here in San Diego, the Mercy, and we have another one, the Comfort, which is on the East Coast. At the time, kept in Baltimore, and that has since been moved down to the Norfolk area. But so within 2 days, the ship sailed. Took a lot of the crew of the medical crew came from the Bethesda Naval Hospital and the Portsmouth Naval Hospital. Interestingly, a lot of the speakers on this are people that I've personally worked with. A lot of them are my shipmates from Bethesda Naval Hospital, and it's just really neat to kind of see what actually happened. And it's a very nice presentation of that. So let me share that with you. I'm a Mac guy, so it takes me a while to figure this out. Sorry.
I know I'm not going to be able to treat everybody for everything. I just knew I had to give everything I had to everybody who was on the ship.
We're going to go to our neighbors around the world and show them that we have compassion.
We take care of people who have so little.
You can put this ship off the coast anywhere, and it is a symbol of we're here to help. We're also here to learn as much from your country as you can from us.
If you were to take Johns Hopkins or Walter Reed and put it inside the skin of a ship, that's what we have.
We have digital x-ray, we have dental, we have optometry,
We have a CAT scan machine.
12 operating rooms, as well as an interventional radiology suite,
We have our own oxygen plant that produces medical oxygen.
80 ICU beds, and hundreds of ward beds.
So anything you can do at a Navy or civilian hospital, we can do it here. The only difference is we can come to you instead of you having to come to us.
Operation Continuing Promise is actually a regular deployment schedule where we take the USNS Comfort to Central and South America. The countries vary a little bit.
We work with the ministries of health to be able to build a partnership of caring, a partnership of learning and education.
We made a promise to these countries that we visited that in any time that they're going to have a need for us to come down and help them, that we would be back.
I was driving home from work, and as I was driving, I started hearing about the earthquake.
And I told my wife, I said, well, I've got to get my sea bag ready because I'm going to be getting a phone call tomorrow. We're going to go down to Haiti probably by the end of the week.
I really felt that this is what I'm preparing my entire life for.
For Operation Unified Response, the ship was underway in 76 hours.
On the way down to Haiti, we kept receiving a lot of information via email about hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people, primarily with orthopedic injuries. But it's one thing to see a couple of pictures on the internet, another thing to know that you're actually going to be part of the human element of what we see in the devastation, the fact that that suffering was going to be coming on board in numbers that we had no idea of how many or for how long.
When we're about 100 miles out, we started getting patients. We went nonstop the first 3 days.
About every 90 seconds, those elevator doors opened, and here come more and more patients. And they just kept coming. Then there would be about a 20-minute delay, the next round of helicopters, and there would be more and more coming.
Anywhere from newborns that didn't have any family left up to, senior citizens.
So it was kind of like a mayhem, because you've got two different cultures, you've got different types of understanding of the disease process.
So each and every patient that would come in, I would spend some time with an interpreter to understand their story, because everyone seemed to be, the next one seemed to be worse than the previous one. You couldn't make this stuff up. We had an individual who was approximately 28 years old, and he had a very bad injury right over his elbow and his dominant arm. Basically, it took out the joint itself. Now, the interesting thing with him was this part worked just fine. So he knew that he was probably going to have an amputation. But in talking to him, he has a family. He has dreams for his kids. So I was with my colleague, a hand surgeon, Dr. Rulin, and we looked and we saw that he may not have an elbow. But what about if we just connect the bones up? If we can get bones to heal, he won't have any motion across the elbow, or what was the elbow, but he'll still have the use of his hand. We took him back after the surgery into the recovery room. The first thing he did when he woke up is he kind of looked down to see if he had a hand. He saw his hand, he grabbed it just like he did before, picked it up. It works, it works.
I think in the big picture, the big scheme of things, having the Comfort and the Mercy shows the rest of the world that we're not just out there to go, drop bombs in the desert and fight wars. We can project a positive image and soft power on the rest of the country, the rest of the world, and maybe change some people's opinions about us.
We are military, but we're in a big white ship. As a matter of fact, many places we go, when they see us off the coast, they call us the Great White Angel from America. every site, hundreds and hundreds of surgeries, lives that are changed, and impressions that are altered for the benefit of the United States of America and our partner and host nations as well.
From a humanitarian assistance perspective, there's not anything more rewarding that you can do truly in the Navy.
One of the things I wanted to share, let's see, there it is. One of the things I wanted to share about that was Lieutenant Commander Etienne, Dr. Etienne, who was the black doctor who was saying I had trained my whole life for this. He actually was born in Haiti. He's a neurologist. And the cultural sensitivity that he portrayed in this film does not even come close to doing justice to the impact that that crew had on that population. Because one of the things that the Navy represents, as do the other services and much of our United States, is diversity. And I don't mean just diversity of gender or diversity of ethnicity, but it's the diversity of cultural background. A lot of people from incredibly wide, diverse parts of the United States, from money, from poverty, naturalized citizens, whatever, just an incredible diversity, all on that ship. And it was the impact, the sort of the unwritten or unspoken impact of just that piece alone. You know, the hope that that projects really has impact. And it's hard to find that kind of opportunity in any position or job. So, Navy-centric, because I'm a Navy guy. I think the Navy's cool. But I want to share with you that. And I will wrap with this. If you recall when I first started talking, I said, I don't understand. You're in military hospitals. Why are you taking care of kids? Why are you taking care of women? And why are you taking care of the elderly? That's why. You've got to practice that to do it well, on a ship or in a tent. And that's what we do. And it's not just the Navy, of course, it's all the services. So that kind of ends my comments. And I will certainly entertain any questions or answer anything I can.
How was your experience in Iraq? Was it mostly treating the civilians in the cities near the front, or was it from a site more distant to the actual combat?
Usually distant, because I was part of the surgical team, and so surgical team is very stuff intensive. We did have the ability to move, but we can't do surgery without stuff. So we tended to bring patients to us.
Do you ever plan on going civilian medicine?
Yes, and I've actually done a lot of civilian medicine while in uniform. I've spent a lot of time in civilian hospitals, both as a practicing physician. So I held privileges for a while at Baltimore Shock Trauma, and I'll just cover anesthesia shifts there. I did a lot of my training at civilian hospitals. But to answer your question, yes. I'd like to think I have a lot of years left of clinical skill and practice, and probably only 5 or 6 years more in the military. So yes, and a lot of us do. The interesting thing is that when you actually poll academic, not just academic, really just medicine in general in the United States, it's surprising how many people who practice medicine in the United States started in the military. Paul?
Yeah. How do you, I guess, what's the difference in standards of care when you go, say, for instance, you're working in a base one day and then say you're going to work civilian? What's the difference in, is it a lot or?
None. The training programs are certified by the same body, so the American College of Graduate Medical Education, which certifies UCSD's training program, certifies NMCSD's.
I guess I meant the protocols.
They're the same.
Follow the same.
Exactly the same.
treatment for-
Yeah, so there's another organization that certifies hospital care, and that's called the Joint Commission for Hospital Accreditation. and we are subjected to it as well. All military hospitals are. The care is exactly the same. In fact, arguably better. We're held to a higher standard. You know, coming from Bethesda Naval Hospital, you know, we would be routinely scrutinized by Congress and the Washington Post, and my sister hospital right across the street that was a private hospital was never scrutinized by either. So it's a little bit higher standard, I would argue. Our outcomes are outstanding. Not perfect, but as good or better than almost any other hospital.
How long on average were your deployments?
The Navy tends to make them about 6 months plus some training. There are exceptions to that. That's about right. The funny thing about deployments, especially in combat, so we have 2 theaters of combat plus there's Africa, is they're joint environments. So sometimes you'll go as a Navy officer to support a Navy mission, but frequently you'll go actually to support an Army or an Air Force mission, and they just didn't have whatever it is that you have. So that's why I'm qualifying everything. The Army, during the mid-years of the Iraq War, routinely were 12-month deployments. And if you were a Navy officer assigned to an Army unit, you went for 12 months. Yeah?
So to go to the military medical uniform services university, was it called?
Yeah, Uniform Services University.
So how much of the curriculum is military specific?
So the medical curriculum is exactly as it is in all other medical schools, plus extra stuff that's military centered.
So instead of spending like 6 hours a day, let's say, studying medicine, it would be 5 hours of medicine and 1 hour of drills?
Yeah, but it's not like ROTC drilling. That's all, everybody knows how to do it. So when I say military specific, you're learning about battlefield medicine. I mean, they just don't learn that at UCSD, but they teach that at Uniform Services. A heavy emphasis on infectious disease. Everybody learns infectious disease. They just have extra hours of it there because that's a big part of what the military does with medical readiness in third world countries is understanding infectious disease risks to you and the population there. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Are there many opportunities for medical research?
Absolutely. So DoD funds, really Congress directs the DoD to fund a lot of medical research, a lot of it very focused on military-specific issues. Armor, protection, recovery, so we have a lot of war wounded who are amputees, so a lot of regenerative medicine, and a lot of the research we do internally, but also much of it we just simply purchase. What I mean is, we'll take a pot of money because it's something that the military is very interested in solving. We will offer that as grant money, and everybody here does research in one form or another, you understand what I'm saying. Nobody offers grant money if the research proposes within this box of things that they're interested in, and you can apply for these grants. So, vast amount of research. And even if you're not directly doing the bench research yourself, often you're coordinating and collaborating with civilian institutions to work together to come to a solution, whatever that might be. Yeah.
How would you project the DoD budget cuts to affect the Navy Med Corps?
Complicated issue because a smart person, as you no doubt are, knows that good healthcare is always about resources, and everything else you figure out. The answer is it will affect it, but probably not in any, certainly in no way will it affect the standard of care or the delivery of healthcare or the mission of healthcare. Military medicine is truly a reflection of what's happening in the United States. When the United States healthcare looks at changing training, we change. When the United States says, you know, medicine just, it costs too much to make somebody healthy, the military says, you know what, you're right. We're truly symbiotic with, if you will, civilian healthcare that way, and because our people move in and out of it, our patients move in and out of it, our providers move in and out of it. So anything that's affecting U.S. healthcare, it's affecting military healthcare. So the real issue is nobody can afford modern healthcare. gonna unravel everything that we have spent generations building. And it's too expensive whether it's delivered in the military healthcare system or it's delivered in the civilian healthcare system. That's the problem. And that we're all grappling with how do we maintain a high standard of care and drive down cost. And the way that's being done, and it's fairly simple stuff, but the way it's being done is it's how we pay for healthcare. Think about it. What we do now is we incentivize touching patients, which is great, and it's an important part of it. But we'll pay more if you touch the patient more. Well, we don't really pay if the patient gets better. So the more times you touch the patient, the more you get paid. It doesn't really matter how they do. But what if we said, I tell you what, I'm going to pay you for this problem, this fixed amount of money, and I'll give you a little extra if the patient does well. Wow, that's like a radical change. And that will probably change how we deliver. And it's going to affect the military too, because a big part of the way we deliver healthcare is actually paying the civilian sector to take care of the patient. And we care a great deal about how that's done. We're all struggling with this. So that's the real question is, if we don't do something about it, it's going to probably radically change our standard of living. And I'll share with you a story that kind of maybe drives that home. I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have the exact details, but it goes like this. The English, British, invaded the Suez shortly after World War I, and got a phone call from the U.S. Foreign Minister saying, Secretary of State saying, yeah, we need to get out. And Britain said, what are you talking about? We built it. They're not doing what we told them to do. It's a national strategic imperative for us that we maintain open seas communication with the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. We have to have it. So thanks for the phone call. Talk to you later. The story goes, the Secretary of State said, fine. Next phone call is from the President to the Prime Minister. Who owns all your national debt? The American President supposedly asked. Well, you do, Mr. President. Okay, get out of Suez. All right, who owns almost all of the United States national debt? Right now, the U.S. and Chinese national strategies are aligned. I mean, when you read the press, you're like, you may not believe that it's true. We're aligned. We're making money off of each other. That's how that goes. So currently we're aligned. But what happens if tomorrow Chinese decide, well, you know what, I don't really like the direction they're going. See, and why do we have such a huge national debt? What's the primary driver of the national debt?
War?
Healthcare. Healthcare. So, we as a nation have got to deal with this. Any other questions?
Can you elaborate on how healthcare is the primary driver for the national debt right now? Or is that really complicated?
Yeah, it's complicated. I encourage you to read about it.
Okay.
I dive into health policy, look at cost of healthcare and its contribution to bankruptcy, both personal and corporate. What percentage of the national commerce is healthcare related, and what do we get for that investment? So for the same dollar spent in the United States, supposedly in Europe, the outcomes are better. So I encourage you to read about it. It's nothing I'm going to say up here that's going to convince you. You've got to read about it yourself.
I have a different topic. So you were also the director of surgical services at the Naval Medical Center, and then also the head of anesthesiology and payments in that Naval Medical Center. Can you elaborate on your experience on?
Yeah, so those are the jobs I had prior. I was chief of anesthesia for a few years, and then after that I was the director for surgical services, so responsible for all surgery going on in the hospital. So that's a typical progression in what's called physician executive medicine. Do you have a specific question?
Can you, I guess, describe your goals and I guess capacity for your duty?
Yeah, so in the National Naval Medical Center, it's about a 260, at the time, 260 bed hospital. Now it's a 360 bed hospital with the integration of Walter Reed. 260 bed hospital, about a 25 bed ICU, a 30 bed NICU, 18 ORs. We had on staff about 40 anesthesiologists, a nurse anesthetist. We had an anesthesia training program, a nurse anesthesia training program. And we did about 40 operative cases a day, of which about 2/3 were inpatient, meaning that the patient was admitted to the hospital and got surgery while they were admitted to the hospital. Some of it was open heart, as I mentioned. So I was responsible for the quality of anesthesia care for the hospital when I was the chief of anesthesia. When I was the director of surgery, not only was I responsible for the quality of anesthesia care, but I was also responsible for the quality of neurosurgical care, cardiac, thoracic surgery care, the ICU, so more. Does that make sense? In the back.
So is that a typical pattern when you increase your rank? Do you just oversee things and interact less with patients, or?
Yes and no. There are full-time clinicians that are the same rank as I am. So in the military, rank is, in the actual line, so this is the warfighters, rank is commensurate with level of responsibility. And if you don't have large responsibility, you don't get promotions. So it kind of goes together. In medicine, we have several tracks. We want leadership. We need clinical leadership. So you've got to incentivize people who have clinical training to want to be a leader. But then you also need clinicians who stay 100% focused on educating residents and taking care of patients. But you don't want to not pay them. And it's very, an anesthesiologist in the United States makes more than what the Navy pays me. So I say because I like it. But if it was strictly about the dollars, I would have left a long time ago. But we also get to choose. So as a Navy captain, and I'm the COO, Chief Operating Officer for a large hospital, I still go to the OR and I do anesthesia. And I do it, like as I said earlier, I'm just going to do the case tomorrow.
So I have two questions, one with the subpart. The first off is, how welcoming is the military medicine towards people with advanced degrees? So say you graduate UCSD and you want to pursue an MPH first before going into medicine.
So check through the accession sources, but typically credit is given and you actually come in a little bit higher rank with advanced training.
Okay, but that's not a problem.
No.
Okay.
In fact, it's encouraged.
Secondly, I think for some people it's a concern the level of commitment and how that interacts with personal responsibilities. For example, so you said you have a family. How did practicing military medicine versus maybe if you had spent most of your time in civilian medicine, how did that affect your responsibilities to your family, your ability to interact with them, if at all?
That's a great question. Of course it affects it, absolutely. The thing is that when I was a deck officer on a Navy ship, I was looking at going to sea for 6 months at a time every other year for my entire 20-year career. As a line officer or a ship driver, you're not worth much if you're not actually on the ship driving. I don't actually drive much, I'm navigating. So I guess from that perspective, it kind of depends on where you're coming from. I think in medicine, it's a demanding mistress. And you know what? You might sleep in your bed, but if you get home after the kids go to bed and leave before they wake up, are you there? So I think it's all in kind of what makes you happy. And maybe that's the real theme of medicine and happiness. If you're in medicine for the money, you make a huge mistake. Because there are a lot easier ways to make money, truly. If you're in medicine for the prestige, I think you've made a mistake. There are a lot easier ways to gain prestige in our society. But if you're in medicine because you want to help people, because you want to master an important subject at a historical crossroads, the philosophy with which we are learning medicine, in my very short career in medicine, is already far outstripped my ability to ever get to understand. It's an amazing profession, but it's a demanding profession, and one that you can only enjoy as a labor of love. Because if there's anybody in the audience who thinks differently, please raise your hand, but it is a killer profession from that perspective. And I shared with a few of you that when I was in medical school, which was very different from college, not just the way it's structured, but I had a real kind of fear in the pit of my stomach. And it wasn't that I was going to fail. That's not what was motivating me. What was motivating me was the fear that I would not learn something that a patient would need. And that was very different from what college was like for me. And I think that's the key. I mean, the only people who failed out of medical school when I went through were the people who didn't like it, which I couldn't understand why they were even there, right? Because it's ridiculously hard if you don't like it. But if you love it, you overcome it. And then as far as family issues are concerned, well, I had family when I went through medical school, and I had family when I went through residency. I never saw them. I saw them more as a staff officer who deployed once I finished my training than I ever saw them while I was training. But the family did fine. So I think it's complicated.
So, sorry, so you don't feel that your military duties in any way added a load to that?
No.
You already maybe started family and medicine?
For us, for my family, no. Because I think we just love what we were doing. As a family, we love it. It fit our style.
Can you elaborate on the differences between military healthcare and VA healthcare?
Sure. Military healthcare is, it's about the beneficiaries. Who do you take care of? You take care of active duty, obviously, primarily, with, in providing humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. And then the other primary beneficiary is the families and retirees of active duty, or former. So all ages, entire spectrum of healthcare. The VA is much more limited. The VA is focused strictly on veterans who are eligible for that federal benefit. So people who have been on active duty, who have been granted the benefit of that VA healthcare. There are exceptions to that, but very few. That's the general thing. The cool thing about the VA is they don't really have a huge amount of experience in women's healthcare, but with the radical change in the opportunities for women in the military, the VA has had to quickly learn. We have a lot of combat injured women in the United States who are being taken care of by the VA. They get pregnant, they have babies, they have all the issues that the VA is not originally sort of set up to do, and they have, the VA, by the way, they get a bad rep. I'll tell you that they are some of the best physicians and best healthcare teams and the most interesting group of innovators currently in the United States. Large healthcare system, and they are constantly setting the standard for improvement and innovation, because their incentive is different from private healthcare. They're doing a great job.
I understand that things like medical malpractice and insurance are different in the military setting. How does that?
What was the first one? I'm sorry.
Things like medical malpractice
Yeah.
and insurance are different in the military setting. How does that affect the, I guess, the care?
Yeah. Okay, this is complicated. We're subject to, I mean, there's as the COO of the hospital, I manage a lot of the risk management of the hospital. I have a whole staff of lawyers. We get sued a lot, actually a lot less than most civilian hospitals, to be honest with you. So it's a real issue. The only difference is that the United States is typically who is being sued, not the individual doctor. However, last question. Good group, lots of good questions.
So it seems like the past 10 years there's been a move towards preventative care in terms of nutrition and, well, I don't think the physical fitness is really a problem with active duty, but things like nutrition and psychological and emotional well-being services in civilian healthcare. Is this also being reflected in military healthcare?
Yeah, actually, we are probably on the forefront of as a large health system adapting what's called medical home. So we're changing the transaction of healthcare away from episodic care to health maintenance. And we're pretty good at it with the active duty forces now, but we now move that into retirees and their active duty families. We have a medical home model, so patients enrolled to a healthcare team, and the healthcare team is primarily managing their well-being and health. We use nutrition, we have health coaches, we're doing all the things because we, like everybody, has realized that it's just a heck of a lot more expensive to take care of someone with poor health habits than it is otherwise. So it's a resource issue. And there's some great stuff going on with the payers too. The payer is an entity that's responsible for paying the healthcare bill of a person. And the payers have taken a great deal of interest in this, and they're actually exploring charging extra, or actually giving you a discount if you engage in healthy behaviors. So Safeway Corporation, the grocery store, bonds, all that, they actually have their own payer. They pay for their own health insurance, and they actually charge their employees less if they don't smoke, if they're maintaining their blood pressure within a certain range, if they do all the things that we know make you healthier and live longer. So there's all kinds of things going on right now to encourage that. But yeah, in the military health system, public health service, everybody in the federal sector is very interested. Thank you, everybody.